My father forgot to hang up. I heard it all. She's a burden. I kept quiet. I sold my $980,000 home. Took everything. Vanished. They returned from Europe smiling until the key broke. The house gone. The letter waiting. A burden made it real. Can you imagine the terror, the gut-wrenching betrayal of watching your brother marry someone, and then, just hours later, your husband whispers 2 words that shatter everything. She's a fraud. What the hell do you even do when the woman you just welcomed into your family turns out to be a ghost, a professional con artist targeting your own father? It's a question that still keeps me up at night because that's exactly what happened to my family. My name is Audrey. I'm 32, and for 5 incredible years, Michael has been my husband, my absolute rock. And my brother, Kyle, he's always been my best friend, my other half. We're incredibly close. So when he invited us to his destination wedding in Napa Valley, we were beyond thrilled. Everything felt perfect. The sprawling vineyards, the golden California sunlight, the joyful anticipation. For 2 blissful days, it was a fairy tale. Then day 3 hit. We were at the post-wedding brunch, the air still buzzing with celebration, when Michael suddenly leaned in, his voice a low, urgent murmur that sent a shiver down my spine. We need to leave. Now. I froze. What? What the hell are you talking about? I hissed back, confusion and irritation warring in my gut. He just looked at me, his face grim, and asked, "You really didn't notice?" What he said next made my stomach drop into my shoes, a feeling I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Michael and I landed in Napa on Thursday, 3 days before the big wedding. Kyle had truly outdone himself, renting this incredible private estate at the Silverado Resort. Enough room for all the immediate family and the wedding party. The place was breathtaking. Rolling vineyards, manicured gardens, mountain views that felt straight out of a movie. My parents, Grace and Thomas, were already there, chatting animatedly with Kyle on the front steps. My dad, ever the enthusiast, was gesticulating wildly, and my mom looked radiant. "There they are!" Kyle shouted, practically flying down the steps to scoop me into a bear hug that lifted me right off my feet. My brother, at 30, still had the energy of a kid on Christmas morning. After he finally put me down and gave Michael a firm handshake that morphed into a half hug, I asked, "So, where's the lucky bride?" He beamed. "Getting her hair done with her bridesmaids. You'll see her at the welcome dinner tonight. You guys are going to love Madison. She's absolutely incredible. I'd only met Madison twice before. Once at Christmas, a quick dinner, and then at their engagement party 3 months ago. Both times, she'd been perfectly pleasant, charming even, but our interactions were brief. Kyle and Madison had met just 10 months prior at a charity fundraiser. Their romance, a complete whirlwind. Engaged after 5 months, and now here we were, celebrating their future. Kyle showed us to our room, a gorgeous suite on the 2nd floor, complete with a king-size bed, a private balcony overlooking the vineyards, and a bathroom bigger than our first apartment. As I unpacked, Michael flopped onto the bed, running his hand over the ridiculously soft sheets. "This place must be costing a fortune," he remarked. "Madison's parents are covering most of it," I explained. "They're loaded. Her dad owns like half of Seattle or something." It all sounded so glamorous and perfect. The welcome dinner that evening was a dream, held in the estate's courtyard under a canopy of fairy lights. I spotted Madison the moment we walked in. She was stunning in a simple white cocktail dress, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves. Effortless beauty that, I'll admit, usually makes me feel instantly inadequate. "Audrey!" she exclaimed, rushing over with open arms. "I'm so happy you're here. Kyle says you two were inseparable growing up. I want to hear all the embarrassing stories." There was something practiced about her enthusiasm, but I chalked it up to pre-wedding nerves. I introduced her to Michael. "The handsome doctor," she said with a dazzling smile. "Kyle told me you just made attending physician at Chicago Memorial. That's incredibly impressive." Michael looked pleasantly surprised that she'd remembered such a detail. "Thank you," he replied, "and congratulations on finishing your MBA at Stanford. Kyle tells us you're already fielding multiple job offers." She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, it was nothing. My father has connections in the business world, so I've been fortunate with opportunities." Throughout dinner, I watched Madison work the room like a seasoned politician. She knew everyone's names, remembered details about their lives, and made each person feel uniquely special. She was especially attentive to my dad, asking thoughtful questions about his investment firm, seeming genuinely fascinated. "She's quite the charmer," Michael whispered to me as we watched her laugh at something my dad said. "She makes Kyle happy," I replied. "That's all that matters." But even then, a tiny, almost imperceptible whisper of unease stirred within me. The rehearsal the next day went off without a hitch. Madison was a vision of efficiency, guiding everyone through their positions with the precision of a military commander, all masked by a breezy calm. There was one odd moment. I went to use the bathroom in the main house and overheard Madison talking to someone in one of the bedrooms. Her voice was different, harder, clipped, not the melodic tone I'd grown used to. "I don't care what it takes, just handle it," she was saying. "We've come too far to mess this up now." The moment she saw me in the hallway, her expression softened instantly, morphing into that warm smile. "Audrey, I was just dealing with a minor flower emergency. Nothing to worry about." Her voice had returned to its usual melodic tone, almost too quickly. As she brushed past, I noticed she was holding a phone in a blue case. Later that day, I saw her texting on a phone with a red case. It struck me as odd, but I dismissed it. Plenty of people have multiple phones, right? I tried to tell myself I was overthinking it. That night, at the rehearsal dinner, Madison gave a touching speech about finding her forever home, in Kyle and our family, her voice breaking with emotion at just the right moments. My mother wiped away tears, and my father looked on with approving eyes. Everything seemed perfect. But as Michael and I walked back to our room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slightly off. That feeling, that persistent, quiet hum of wrongness, was starting to get louder. The second day of festivities began with a champagne breakfast on the terrace. Madison was already there, looking fresh and radiant despite the late night. "Good morning, you two," she called out cheerfully. "I've asked the chef to prepare something special for us today." As we ate, I noticed her checking her phone constantly, stepping away at regular intervals to take calls. At one point, I went inside to grab a sweater and accidentally walked in on her having what sounded like a very intense conversation in a side room. "Listen, we can't afford any mistakes," she was saying in a hushed, urgent tone. "Everything needs to be in place by Sunday. The accounts should be accessible by then." When she noticed me, she quickly ended the call, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "Wedding planner," she explained with an eye roll. "There's always some crisis to manage." I nodded, but inside, a tiny alarm bell went off. I distinctly remembered her wedding planner was a man named Jeffrey, and the voice I'd heard her call Sweetie had definitely been female. Back at breakfast, I noticed she was now using a phone with a different case than before. The blue one was gone, replaced by the red one I'd seen yesterday. When she stepped away again, I mentioned it to Michael. "Maybe she has separate phones for wedding stuff and personal use," he suggested, but I could tell he found it odd too. The alarm bells were starting to ring for both of us. The day rolled on with pre-wedding activities. Madison had arranged a wine tasting for the guests, while the bridal party had final fittings and preparations. As a bridesmaid, I spent most of the afternoon in a flurry of dress adjustments and hair trials. In the fitting room, I observed Madison's interactions with the other bridesmaids. She was controlling, but in a way that wasn't immediately obvious. Her suggestions were actually commands. Her compliments often came with subtle critiques. "Alyssa, honey, that hairstyle looks so much better than what you initially wanted," she'd say, almost as if she were speaking to a child. "Thank goodness we changed it." Alyssa would just smile weakly, a little too strained. When the stylist suggested a slight change to Madison's elaborate updo, her eyes flashed with momentary anger before she composed herself. "I think we should stick to the original plan," she said with a tight smile. "It's my special day, after all." The mask almost slipped. During a break, I found myself chatting with Stephanie, the maid of honor and Madison's cousin. When I mentioned Madison's Stanford MBA, Stephanie looked genuinely confused. "Stanford? I thought she went to UCLA," she said, then quickly added, "But maybe I'm mixing things up. We have so many cousins, it's hard to keep track." Before I could ask for clarification, Madison appeared, linking her arm through Stephanie's. "What are you two gossiping about?" she asked lightly, but there was an unmistakable edge in her voice, a sudden chill in the air. "Just getting to know each other," I replied, forcing a smile, but my mind was racing. Later that afternoon, I witnessed an interaction that left me feeling distinctly uncomfortable. Jeffrey, the wedding planner, approached Madison with a concern about the seating arrangement. Madison's response was immediate and harsh. "I don't pay you to bring me problems, Jeffrey. I pay you to solve them," she snapped, her voice cold and dismissive. The moment she noticed me watching, her demeanor changed instantly. "Jeffrey, I'm so sorry," she said, touching his arm gently. "Pre-wedding stress is getting to me. Please arrange the tables however you think best." Jeffrey looked relieved but wary, like a dog that's been unexpectedly kicked by its owner. It was a terrifying glimpse behind the curtain. That evening, during the bridesmaids' dinner, Madison excused herself multiple times to take calls. Each time she returned, she was slightly more tense, though she tried to hide it behind bright smiles and enthusiastic toasts. As we were leaving the restaurant, I saw Michael waiting in the lobby. He'd been at the groomsmen's dinner with Kyle, but they'd apparently finished early. "How was your evening?" I asked as we walked back to our room. "Interesting," he replied thoughtfully, his brow furrowed. "Kyle's friends are great, but what?" Michael hesitated. "It's probably nothing. Just that some of the stories Kyle tells about how they met don't quite match what Madison has told people." "Like what?" "Well, Kyle says they met at a charity auction where he outbid her for a vacation package. But one of her friends mentioned tonight that Madison always tells the story of the meeting when she spilled coffee on him at a cafe." I frowned. "That is weird. Maybe they're remembering different encounters." Michael nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. Neither was I. The small, unsettling pieces of the puzzle were starting to connect, forming a picture I didn't want to see. As we prepared for bed, I found myself analyzing every interaction I'd had with Madison. The small inconsistencies, the moments where a mask seemed to slip, revealing something harder underneath her perfect exterior. But then, I reminded myself that wedding stress could bring out the worst in anyone, and I was probably being overly critical of the woman my brother loved. Still, as I drifted off, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right with the soon-to-be newest member of our family. That gnawing intuition refused to be silenced. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, with just enough breeze to keep the temperature perfect. From my window, I could see the staff making final preparations in the garden where the ceremony would take place. Despite my lingering concerns, I was determined to focus on the positive. This was Kyle's day, and he was clearly head over heels. Who was I to question his judgment based on a few odd moments? I pushed my anxieties down. The bridal suite was a flurry of activity when I arrived. Madison sat calmly in the center of the chaos, a makeup artist working on her face, a hairstylist putting the finishing touches on her elaborate updo. She looked stunning, almost ethereal. "Audrey," she exclaimed when she saw me, "come sit by me. I want to give you something." She gestured to a small box on the vanity. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single pearl. "It's to thank you for welcoming me into your family," Madison said, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror, so sincere. "Kyle tells me you're his rock, so your approval means everything to me." I was genuinely touched by the gesture and immediately felt a wave of guilt for my suspicions. "It's beautiful, Madison. Thank you. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just being judgmental." The ceremony itself was picture perfect. Kyle looked handsome and nervous in his tuxedo, his love for her radiating from him. And when Madison walked down the aisle in her designer gown, there were audible gasps from the guests. My brother's face as he watched her approach was a mixture of awe and adoration that brought tears to my eyes. Their vows were personal and moving. Madison spoke about finding her forever home, in Kyle and our family, her voice breaking with emotion at just the right moments. As I watched them exchange rings, I pushed aside my nagging doubts. Clearly, this woman loved my brother. It had to be real. At the reception, Madison was the epitome of the perfect bride. She floated from table to table, charming everyone she spoke with, a social butterfly. She was particularly attentive to my parents, making sure their glasses were always full, drawing them into conversations with her family members. I put Family members in mental quotation marks because I'd noticed something odd. Madison seemed to have very few actual relatives at the wedding. There was Stephanie, the maid of honor, supposedly her cousin, and an older couple, introduced as her aunt and uncle. Her parents were there, of course. Her father, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair, who spoke little but watched everything with keen eyes. Where are all of Madison's friends from Stanford? I asked Michael as we danced. Or her childhood friends. It seems like most of the guests are either her parents' friends or Kyle's people. Michael's brow furrowed. I was thinking the same thing. And have you noticed how her accent seems to shift slightly depending on who she's talking to? Now that he mentioned it, I had noticed that. With my parents, she had a slightly more pronounced West Coast inflection. But with her uncle, her speech patterns were distinctly different, almost unplaceable. Maybe she's just one of those people who unconsciously mirrors others, I suggested, but I didn't entirely believe it myself. The uneasiness was back, heavier now. As the night progressed, I observed Madison carefully steering certain people toward or away from each other. She seemed particularly intent on keeping my father engaged in conversation with her own father. They appeared to be deep in discussion about investment opportunities, my father looking increasingly interested as the evening wore on. At one point, I overheard a fragment of their conversation. Thomas, with your expertise in sustainable energy investments and my connections in the Asian markets, we could create something revolutionary, Madison's father was saying. My father, who had indeed made his fortune in green energy investments, was nodding enthusiastically. I've been looking for an entry point into those markets for years. The regulatory hurdles have been substantial. I have ways around those, Madison's father replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Later, I noticed Michael taking photos with his phone. Not just the usual reception snapshots, but deliberate images of Madison with different groups of people. When I asked him about it, he shrugged. Just capturing memories, he said. But there was a tension in his voice that I recognized from his most difficult hospital cases, when he suspected a diagnosis but needed more evidence before confirming it. It was then I knew he was doing more than just capturing memories. The celebration continued until well after midnight. By the time Michael and I returned to our room, I was exhausted, but also deeply unsettled. Something about the day had felt off, despite its apparent perfection. Did you enjoy yourself? Michael asked as we got ready for bed. Yes, I said automatically, then amended, mostly. Did you? He hesitated before answering. It was an interesting day. That non-answer hung between us as we fell into an uneasy sleep, both too tired to probe further, but too disturbed to discuss it properly. The air felt heavy with unspoken concerns. The post-wedding brunch was scheduled for 11 a.m. in the estate's garden. Despite the late night, most guests made an appearance, though many were moving slowly and drinking the offered Bloody Marys and mimosas with grateful enthusiasm. Kyle and Madison were seated at the center table, accepting congratulations and looking appropriately tired but happy. Madison had transformed once again, now playing the role of gracious new wife, wearing a simple white sundress with her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. Michael had been quiet all morning, constantly checking his phone and stepping away for brief calls. When I asked who he was talking to, he gave vague answers about checking in with the hospital. This was unusual for him. Michael was typically fully present during our rare vacation time together. The knot of anxiety in my stomach tightened further. We took our seats at the family table with my parents, who were still glowing with happiness for Kyle. Isn't she just wonderful? My mother said, nodding toward Madison, who was laughing at something one of the groomsmen had said. So accomplished and poised. Kyle really found himself a catch. And her father's connections could be extremely valuable, my father added in a lower voice. We had a fascinating conversation last night about some potential joint ventures. Dad, you're not actually considering investing with someone you just met, are you? I asked, alarmed. Robert isn't just someone, Audrey, my father replied, looking slightly offended. He's built an impressive portfolio across multiple industries. We're having lunch next week in Chicago to discuss specifics. My heart pounded. This was exactly what Michael seemed to be worried about. Before I could respond, Michael's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. Excuse me, he murmured, standing up and walking away from the table. Through the window, I could see him pacing on the lawn, his conversation appearing increasingly intense, his body language taut. When he returned about 15 minutes later, his face was grim, almost set in stone. Just then, Madison approached our table. "Thomas," she said to my father, "I meant to ask you about your thoughts on the Sherman portfolio approach to diversification. Dad mentioned you've had remarkable success with similar strategies." My father looked impressed and launched into a detailed explanation of his investment philosophy. What struck me as odd, what made my blood run cold, was that this information wasn't publicly available. It was my father's proprietary strategy that he developed over decades. How would Madison know about it? The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying thud. As my father and Madison discussed investment terms that went over my head, Michael leaned close to my ear. "We need to leave now," he whispered, his voice urgent but low enough that no one else could hear. I turned to him in surprise, my heart racing. "What? We can't just leave in the middle of brunch. The wedding was yesterday. Trust me, Audrey, we need to go. I'll explain everything, but not here." Something in his tone, that desperate urgency, made my stomach clench with anxiety. "Is it the hospital? An emergency?" "No," he said, his eyes flicking meaningfully toward Madison, a cold fire in them. "It's about the bride." "What the hell are you talking about?" I hissed, trying to keep my voice down, my voice barely a whisper of fear. Michael's jaw tightened. "You really didn't notice, Audrey. She's not who she says she is. Not even close." My blood ran cold, the champagne breakfast turning to acid in my stomach. What he said next made my stomach drop, felt like the ground had just fallen away from beneath my feet. "Madison Wilson doesn't exist. Your brother married a con artist who's been targeting your family, specifically your father, for months." I stared at him in disbelief, my mind reeling. "That's ridiculous. How could you possibly know that?" "I'll show you everything, but we need privacy now." Michael stood abruptly, putting on a convincing show of apologetic concern. "I'm so sorry, everyone, but I just got called in for an emergency surgery. We need to head back to Chicago right away." My mother looked disappointed. "Oh, must you? Can't another doctor handle it?" "It's a complicated case that I've been managing," Michael explained smoothly, his voice unwavering despite the lie. "I wouldn't leave if it wasn't absolutely necessary." I watched in a daze as Michael made our excuses to Kyle and Madison. Madison's expression was perfectly appropriate, disappointed but understanding, the concerned new sister-in-law. "I was hoping we'd have more time to get to know each other better," she said, embracing me. "But we'll have plenty of opportunities when you visit us in San Francisco." As she hugged me, I caught a glimpse of something in her eyes, a flash of cold, calculating assessment that sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. It was the look of a predator. 20 minutes later, we were in our rental car, driving away from the estate. The moment we were out of sight, I turned to Michael, my voice trembling. "Explain. Now." Michael pulled over at a scenic overlook a few miles from the estate. He took out his phone and pulled up a folder of images and documents. "I knew something was off the first day we arrived," he began, his voice calm but firm. Little inconsistencies in her stories, the way she subtly manipulated conversations. It reminded me of a patient I had last year who turned out to be faking symptoms to get medications. "So, you decided she was a con artist because she reminded you of a drug-seeking patient?" I asked, my voice incredulous, still grasping for denial. "No. I decided to look into her background because my instincts were screaming that something wasn't right," Michael replied calmly. "After the rehearsal dinner, I contacted a college friend who works in private security. He owed me a favor, and I asked him to run a quick background check. You investigated our brother's fiancée without telling anyone." I was stunned, my mind struggling to process. "I was hoping to be proven wrong," Michael said. "But what came back this morning confirmed my worst suspicions." "Look!" He handed me his phone. On the screen was a driver's license for a woman named Erica Donovan. The photo was unmistakably Madison, though with darker hair. "This is from 3 years ago in Boston," Michael explained. "She was married to a hedge fund manager named Lawrence Patton. She disappeared with nearly $2 million from their joint accounts right after he introduced her to his highest value clients." I scrolled through more images, Madison with different hair colors, different names, standing beside different men. News articles about investment scams and missing funds. "This can't be real," I whispered, though the undeniable evidence in my hands was overwhelming, crushing. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. My friend was able to find 3 confirmed identities she's used in the past 5 years, Michael continued. Madison Wilson, Erica Donovan, and Catherine Miller. Each time, the pattern is the same. She marries into money, integrates herself into the family's financial affairs, then disappears with as much as she can take. But how did she target Kyle? He doesn't have millions. Michael's expression was grim. Kyle was never the target, Audrey. Your father was. Kyle was just the way in. I sat in stunned silence, staring at the evidence on Michael's phone. There were police reports, news articles, and even a warning bulletin from the FBI about a woman matching Madison's description who was wanted for questioning in connection with multiple fraud cases across the country. According to what my friend found, she's been operating for at least 7 years, Michael explained. She typically uses a team, people who pose as family members or business associates, to help establish her credibility. The cousin, I murmured, remembering Stephanie's confusion about which university Madison had attended. And her parents, likely actors hired to play the part. Exactly. The man posing as her father has been identified in connection with at least 2 other scams. He's known for targeting wealthy business owners, gaining their trust, then proposing investment opportunities that turn out to be elaborate Ponzi schemes. I scrolled through more documents, my hand still shaking violently. There was a marriage certificate showing Erica Donovan had married Lawrence Petton in Boston 4 years ago. Another showed Catherine Miller had married Richard Hoffman in Seattle just 2 years ago. What happened to these men? Her other husbands? Michael's expression was grim. Financial ruin. Mostly. Petton lost nearly everything and had to declare bankruptcy. Hoffman managed to recover some of his assets because he caught on faster, but he still lost over $1 million. Their lives were utterly devastated. And now she's after Dad. I said, the horrific reality finally sinking in, a cold, hard knot of fear in my chest. That's why she's been so focused on his business, asking all those questions about his investment strategies. She was studying him. Your father mentioned at brunch that he's meeting with her father next week to discuss investment opportunities. Michael reminded me. I'm guessing that meeting would have ended with him transferring funds into accounts they control, and then she'd vanish. I thought back to all the moments that had seemed odd, but that I dismissed. Madison's different phones, her changing accent, the private conversations I'd overheard, her detailed knowledge of my father's business. Every single anomaly now screamed betrayal. We have to tell Kyle, I said, my heart breaking for my brother and my parents. The pain of imagining his devastation was almost unbearable. We need to be strategic about this, Michael cautioned. People like Madison, or whatever her real name is, are practiced at deflecting accusations. If we approach this wrong, she could disappear with whatever she's already managed to access, or worse, convince your family that we're the ones lying. We'll be fighting against a master manipulator. What do you suggest? We gather more concrete evidence, then present everything at once. No warning, no chance for her to prepare a defense or escape plan. We hit her with everything she can't deny. I nodded, though the thought of confronting Madison filled me with dread. How do we get more evidence? Your father's accounts. Has Madison had any opportunity to access his financial information, passwords, account numbers? I thought hard. Dad always keeps everything on his laptop, and he's pretty security conscious, but he mentioned yesterday that he was showing Madison's father some projections for a potential joint venture. His laptop. We need to check if anything's been compromised, Michael said, his voice urgent. And we need to move quickly. Based on what I've learned about her pattern, she usually makes her move within days of the wedding, while everyone is still caught up in the celebration. Sunday is her deadline. We drove to a nearby town where we checked into a small hotel to plan our next steps. Michael continued communicating with his security contact while I called a close friend of mine who worked in cybersecurity. Jen, I need a huge favor, I explained, giving her a brief, frantic outline of the situation. Can you check if there's been any unusual access to my father's accounts or systems? Jen was shocked but immediately agreed to help. My father had set her up with her first job out of college, and she was still grateful for his mentorship. I'll need his permission and access credentials, she said. This isn't exactly legal otherwise. I called my father, creating a story about Michael needing some investment advice for a colleague and asking if Jen could access his models as examples. Dad, completely unsuspecting, agreed without hesitation, providing the necessary information. 2 hours later, Jen called back, her voice tense, a stark contrast to her usual calm. Audrey, someone's been in his system, she confirmed, and my blood ran cold. They installed a sophisticated key logger 3 days ago. It's been capturing everything. Passwords, account numbers, communications with his financial institutions. Everything. My breath caught in my throat. Can you tell who did it? The intrusion came from a device on the same local network as your father. So, someone physically present at the wedding venue. I've disabled the key logger and changed his critical passwords, but whoever did this already has a lot of information. They had access to everything. I thanked Jen profusely, promising to explain everything later, my voice a strangled whisper. When I relayed this information to Michael, his expression darkened. We need to go back now, he said, his voice clipped. Tonight, before they have a chance to use what they've gathered. Before they can vanish with Dad's life savings. We drove back to the estate, the setting sun casting long, ominous shadows. We arrived just as dinner was ending. I texted Kyle, asking him to meet us privately, saying only that it was urgent and concerned Madison. Kyle met us in the estate's library, his expression a mixture of concern and annoyance. What's going on? Why did you leave so suddenly? And why all the secrecy? I took a deep, shaky breath, knowing the next words would shatter his world. Kyle, what I'm about to tell you is going to be incredibly hard to hear. But we have undeniable evidence that Madison isn't who she claims to be. His face immediately hardened, a wall going up. What are you talking about? This is crazy. Michael stepped forward, opening his laptop. Madison Wilson doesn't exist. The woman you married has used at least 3 different identities in the past 5 years. She's wanted for questioning in multiple fraud cases. She's a professional con artist. Kyle's laugh was dismissive, almost hysterical. This is insane. You both lost your minds. You're trying to ruin my wedding. Please, just look at what we found. I pleaded, gesturing to the screen, my own eyes welling with tears for him. For the next 20 minutes, we showed Kyle everything. The multiple identities, the pattern of marriages followed by financial theft, the evidence of a key logger on our father's computer. With each new piece of information, my brother's face grew paler, the color draining from it. His eyes darted between the screen and our faces, searching for a lie, for an escape. This can't be real, he whispered, his voice broken. But I could see the doubt, the horrifying realization, creeping into his eyes. We've been together for almost a year. I would have noticed something. She's very good at what she does, Michael said gently. These people are professionals. They create elaborate backstories and have teams supporting their cons. They target vulnerabilities. If this is true, Kyle said, his voice breaking, barely audible, then nothing about our relationship was real. Nothing. It was all a lie. The pain in his eyes was unbearable, a raw, gaping wound. I moved to embrace him, tears streaming down my face. But at that moment, the library door opened. My father stood there, looking confused, drawn in by the tense atmosphere. What's going on in here? Madison said you all disappeared after dinner. Kyle looked at me, a silent, agonizing question in his eyes. I nodded, a silent command to tell him. Dad, he said, his voice steadier than I expected, laced with an awful dread. You need to see this. It's about Madison. My father's reaction to the evidence was initially similar to Kyle's, disbelief, followed by anger, not at Madison, but at us for making such accusations, for daring to cast a shadow on his son's perfect wedding. This is preposterous. My son just married this woman. But as Michael methodically walked him through everything we'd discovered, highlighting the unauthorized access to his computer and financial accounts, his expression shifted from anger to concern, and finally, to grim, devastating understanding. The pride in his eyes for his new daughter-in-law evaporated, replaced by cold fury. We need to confront her, my father said, his voice hard in a way I'd rarely heard, an edge of steel. Now, before this goes any further, we should involve the police, Michael suggested. Dad shook his head. Not yet. First, I want to hear what she has to say for herself. Face to face. Kyle had been silent for several minutes, staring at the wedding photo on his phone, the image of his smiling bride now a mockery. I want to be the one to confront her, he said suddenly, his voice hollow. Alone? Absolutely not. I responded immediately, fear seizing me. These people are dangerous, Kyle. She could hurt you. She's my wife, he said, his voice cracking on the last word, the pain tearing through him. If anyone is going to demand the truth from her, it should be me. After some heated negotiation, we agreed on a compromise. Kyle would confront Madison, but the rest of us would be present, hidden from view. My father insisted on including my mother, believing she had a right to know what was happening. We gathered in my parents' suite, our nerves frayed, hearts pounding. We sent a message to Madison that there was a family emergency to discuss. While waiting for her to arrive, I pulled Kyle aside. Are you sure you're ready for this? I asked, concerned about the hollow, broken look in his eyes. No, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. But I need to do it anyway. I need to know. Madison arrived looking appropriately concerned, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, the picture of a supportive new wife, ready to help her family through a crisis. Her mask was perfectly in place. What's wrong? She asked, her eyes moving from face to face, feigning innocence. Has something happened? The room was tense with silence for a moment, thick with unspoken accusations, before Kyle stepped forward. We know, Madison, he said quietly, his voice surprisingly steady, despite the tremor in his hands. Or should I call you Erica? Or Catherine? Which name do you prefer these days? Her expression flickered for just a moment. Surprise, then a flash of cold, calculating assessment, then back to concerned confusion. It was so quick I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching for it, watching every tiny shift in her face. Kyle, what are you talking about? You're scaring me. Michael moved to the desk where his laptop was open, the incriminating evidence blazing on the screen. We have documentation of your previous identities, marriage certificates, police reports, news articles about the men you've defrauded. Madison laughed, but it sounded forced, brittle, like breaking glass. This is ridiculous. There must be some mistake. Some woman who looks like me, perhaps. No mistake, my father said grimly, his voice cutting through her. Pretense. We also have evidence that someone installed spyware on my computer during the wedding festivities. Someone who was trying to access my financial accounts. Madison's eyes narrowed slightly. She glanced toward the door, assessing her options, a flicker of panic in them. Don't even think about it, I warned, stepping forward. Security knows not to let you leave the property. This was a bluff, a desperate gamble. We hadn't actually spoken to security, but Madison didn't know that. I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, she said, her voice taking on a harder, colder edge. But I won't stand here and be accused of crimes I didn't commit. Kyle, surely you don't believe these lies. Kyle's face was a mask of agonizing pain, his heart visibly shattering. I want to believe you, Madison, more than anything in the world. So explain it to me. Explain why there's a marriage certificate showing you married Lawrence Petton in Boston 4 years ago under the name Erica Donovan. For a moment, Madison maintained her facade of outraged innocence. Then, seeing the unwavering certainty in our faces, the game was up. Something changed. Her posture shifted, her expression hardened, and it was like watching a mask fall away, revealing a chillingly different person underneath. Well, she said, her voice entirely different now, clipped cool, with a hint of an accent I couldn't place, her true self finally exposed. This is certainly unexpected. I underestimated you, Dr. Mitchell. She nodded at Michael, a venomous glint in her eyes. Most people see what they want to see. You actually looked. My mother gasped, a choked sound, her hand flying to her mouth. Kyle took a physical step backward, as if her transformation had struck him like a blow, physically recoiling from the monster she had become. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes wide with a profound agony. Was any of it real? Madison, or whoever she was, tilted her head, considering him, as if calculating her next move. Your company? I didn't dislike our time together, if that's what you're asking. But business is business. And what business is that exactly? My father demanded, his voice a low growl of fury. Defrauding innocent people, destroying lives? She smiled, a cold, empty expression that never reached her eyes. I prefer to think of it as wealth redistribution. Men like you have more than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. I simply help spread it around. To yourself, I said disgustedly, my voice laced with venom. She shrugged, utterly unapologetic. I provide a service. I make people happy. Give them what they want. Love, affirmation, excitement. The fact that it comes with a price tag is just business. Where are your accomplices? Michael asked, cutting through her chilling rhetoric. The people posing as your family? Already gone, she replied with a smirk, utterly devoid of emotion. They left last night, actually. Standard procedure after the main event. The calculated way she spoke about the wedding, the main event, made my stomach churn, a wave of pure nausea. I couldn't imagine how Kyle was feeling, how utterly sick he must have been. You won't get away with this, my father said, his voice shaking with a righteous anger. We've documented everything. The police will. Do what exactly? She interrupted, a sneer on her face. Charge me with marrying a man who willingly gave me access to his life? I haven't actually taken anything from you, Thomas. Not yet. And Kyle signed a prenuptial agreement that's quite generous to me, as I'm sure you'll recall. A prenup obtained under false pretenses, with a false identity, Michael pointed out, his voice sharp and precise. No court would uphold it. For the first time, Madison looked slightly less confident, a flicker of something close to fear in her eyes. Perhaps, but prosecuting me would mean publicly admitting how easily you were all fooled. The press would have a field day with that story. Prominent Chicago investor Thomas Reynolds, nearly scammed by fake socialite. Is that publicity you want for your firm? For your family? The room fell silent, the weight of her threat heavy in the air. She was right that a public scandal could damage my father's business reputation. Clients might question his judgment. The silence stretched, unbearable. You're forgetting something, Kyle said suddenly, his voice stronger now, a flicker of defiance in his eyes. The other men you've conned. I'm guessing they chose not to press charges for the same reasons, to avoid embarrassment. But together, that's a pattern. That's enough for federal charges. We're not the only victims. Madison's eyes flashed with momentary concern before she composed herself, though the composure felt brittle this time. Well, this has been fascinating, but I think our relationship has run its course. She reached for her purse, which she'd placed on a chair, preparing to make her exit. I'll be leaving now. You won't find me, so don't bother trying. Actually, my father said, pulling out his phone, a grim satisfaction in his voice. While we've been having this conversation, my security team has been freezing all my accounts and notifying the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're quite interested in speaking with you. They've been waiting for a break in your case for years, Alexandra. Now, real, unadulterated fear showed on Madison's face. Her eyes widened, her bravado crumbling. You're bluffing. My father simply held up his phone, showing an email confirmation from the FBI acknowledging receipt of his information, a chilling timestamp on our victory. You have two choices, he continued calmly, his voice regaining its authority. Wait here for the FBI to arrive, or try running with nothing but the clothes on your back. Your operation has been exposed. Your accomplices have abandoned you. It's over. Madison looked around the room, her composed facade crumbling completely as she realized she was trapped, utterly defeated. Her eyes settled on Kyle, a desperate, final attempt at manipulation. I could have made you happy, she said, her voice softer, almost pleading. We could have had a good life together. Kyle shook his head, his expression a mixture of disgust and profound pity. None of it was real. You never even existed. The lie had finally met its end. The hours following our confrontation with Madison were a blur of police statements, FBI interviews, and shocking revelations. Her real name, we learned, was Alexandra Petrovic. Born in Belgrade, Serbia, She had been running confidence schemes since her late teens, eventually graduating to the elaborate marriage and investment frauds that had brought her into our lives. The FBI had been tracking her network for years, but had always been one step behind. Her accomplices, the people who had posed as her parents and relatives at the wedding, were professional con artists who worked with various crews around the country. Some had already been identified by law enforcement, but most remained at large. Kyle was utterly devastated. The sheriff's deputies who took Madison, Alexandra, away had to physically support him as he watched his bride of less than 48 hours being placed in a police car. It was heartbreaking to witness. The marriage would be annulled, of course, but the emotional damage couldn't be so easily undone. The wedding guests were told a sanitized version of events, that Madison had misrepresented herself, and the marriage was being annulled. Most assumed it was some kind of green card scam or secret past that had been discovered. Only our immediate family knew the full, terrifying truth of the deep, calculated betrayal. In the days that followed, we discovered just how close Madison had come to succeeding. The key logger on my father's computer had captured enough information to potentially access accounts containing millions of dollars. Had we not intervened when we did, she and her accomplices might have disappeared with a substantial portion of my father's assets, leaving him utterly ruined. I still can't believe I was so blind, my father said as we sat in his study a week after the wedding, a deep regret etched on his face. I'm supposed to be good at reading people. It's part of my business. How could I have fallen for it? She was a professional, Dad. Michael reminded him gently. This is what she does, what she's been doing for years, honing her craft. You can't blame yourself. I keep going over every moment, every conversation, Kyle said hollowly. He had moved temporarily into my parents' house, unable to face returning to the apartment he had shared with Madison, endlessly replaying the events, trying to see if there were signs I missed. There were signs, Kyle, I acknowledged, my voice soft, but they were subtle, and she was skilled at distracting from them, at making you see what she wanted you to see. The important thing is that she didn't succeed. We stopped her. The FBI investigation revealed that Madison/Alexandra had been planning this con for over a year. She had specifically targeted Kyle after identifying our father as a potential mark. His investment firm managed over $300 million in assets, making him an incredibly attractive target for her network. She had created an elaborate backstory complete with fake social media accounts going back years and paid actors to pose as references who could vouch for her if anyone checked. The most chilling discovery was a storage unit rented under one of her aliases. Inside were detailed files on our entire family, our habits, preferences, vulnerabilities. She had studied us like specimens, looking for the best way to infiltrate our lives and gain our trust, to exploit our open hearts. In the months that followed, our family went through a period of intense healing and rebuilding. My father implemented enhanced security measures for all his accounts and business dealings, now with a healthy, if painful, skepticism. My mother threw herself into supporting Kyle, arranging therapy sessions and making sure he wasn't alone with his thoughts for too long, nurturing him back to health. Michael and I stayed in Chicago for 2 weeks after the wedding before returning to our own lives, but we called Kyle daily, sometimes just sitting in silence on the phone when he couldn't find words to express his pain. Slowly, gradually, things began to improve. 3 months after the wedding that wasn't, Kyle decided to move to Chicago to be closer to family, to rebuild his life near his true support system. He found a position at a tech company downtown and rented a small apartment near my parents' house. 6 months out, he went on his first date, a casual coffee with a woman from his new workplace. It didn't lead to anything romantic, but it was a crucial, brave step toward normalcy, toward reclaiming his future. A year after the wedding, we gathered for a family dinner. It wasn't a celebration, exactly, but an acknowledgement of how far we'd come, how much we had survived together. Kyle was smiling again, telling jokes, and talking about a promotion at work. My father had begun to trust his instincts again, though he now had a healthy skepticism that hadn't been there before, a wiser, more guarded approach to new connections. You know what I've learned from all this, Kyle said as we finished dessert, a newfound maturity in his eyes. It's not that people can't be trusted. It's that trust has to be earned over time, not given away in a rush of emotion. not built on a perfectly crafted illusion. And real love doesn't try to separate you from your support system, my mother added softly. It strengthens those connections. It builds them up, not tears them down. Michael squeezed my hand under the table, his fingers a comforting anchor. In a strange way, the ordeal had strengthened our marriage too. His instincts and persistence had protected our family from disaster, and my trust in him had never wavered, even when the accusations seemed impossible to believe. The case against Alexandra Petrovic was still making its way through the legal system. She had been connected to at least 5 other similar scams across the country, and prosecutors were confident she would face significant prison time. Some of her accomplices had been identified and arrested, though the man who had posed as her father remained at large, the elusive ringleader. As for our family, we had emerged stronger and wiser. The experience had taught us to trust our instincts when something feels wrong, to look beneath perfect surfaces for the truth underneath, and most importantly, to hold tight to the genuine connections that sustain us through life's challenges. We had been targeted because we were a close, trusting family. But in the end, it was those same qualities that had saved us. Our bonds had been tested, violently shaken, but not broken. And Kyle, though still healing, had begun to look toward the future again with hope. The woman he had loved might never have existed, but the capacity for real love within him remained intact. One day, he would find someone worthy of that gift, someone truly real. So what about you? Have you ever had that gut-wrenching feeling that something was just off about someone, even when everyone else seemed to adore them? Or maybe you've been in a situation where your intuition screamed, but you tried to ignore it, telling yourself you were crazy? I really want to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. What would you have done in our place if you discovered your new sister-in-law was a con artist? Tell me what you think. I really want to know. And if this story helped you in any way, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, protecting yourself and your loved ones starts with awareness and trusting that quiet voice inside you. Thank you for listening, and I wish you relationships built on genuine trust and unwavering love.